In 1977, the Voyager spacecraft left Earth with 2 vinyl records on board. Sort of like a time capsule, these records were made of solid gold and held a series of sounds and images intended for extraterrestrial life. They were meant to show the diversity of culture and life on our planet. As the astronomer Carl Sagan put it, the launching of this bottle into the cosmic ocean says something very hopeful about life on this planet. And yet, the scientists who composed the contents of this record, which took about a year, had a massive task on their hands. How do you encapsulate the sounds, images, and messages of our planet? In July 2020, more than 40 years later, the UAE sent off its own mission to space, the Emirates Mars mission, called the Hope Probe, or Misbar al-Amal in Arabic.
What if you get a sound to that expedition?
That's A.R. Rahman, the renowned Indian composer and performer.
And what if it's, embracing different cultures but also having a very peculiar sound and still feel like it's going to space? And there's a kind of emotion which happens if you just look at even a photograph in space. There's an emotion of vastness which makes us feel like we're so small.
Using the Amal space expedition as a source of inspiration, A.R. Rahman began his task of composing an original piece for the Firdaus Orchestra, the legacy orchestra that debuted at Expo 2020 Dubai.
I was introduced to the Expo by Mr. Kapoor, Shekhar Kapoor, and I met Her Excellency Reem Al Hashmi, and while we were talking, she said, "Why don't you start an orchestra here?" And then I said, "Why? It will be a great idea with all-female orchestra from the region,
And so the Heavenly Firdaus Orchestra was born, an ensemble of 50 female musicians from across the Arab world that bring together a constellation of different talents and diverse instruments. In this episode, the first in a 3-part series exploring music at Dubai's Expo, we'll chart the makings of this wonderful orchestra with its gifted conductor, Yasmina Sabbah, and star mentor, A.R. Rahman. I'm Noon Saleh, and this is Inside Expo, an official podcast of Expo 2020 Dubai, where history is being made. A recipient of numerous awards, including a Golden Globe for his work on the Slumdog Millionaire film soundtrack, 2 Oscars, and 2 Grammys, A.R. Rahman has sold over 150 million records, and his work is well known throughout the world.
I remember when I was young, I actually performed one of his pieces in my local choir in Beirut as a student. It was called Zikr, and it was a beautiful, beautiful piece. And I was like, oh my God, wow, that's the composer that, we sang for. My name is Yasmina Sabbah, and I'm a choir and orchestra conductor.
With Yasmina at the helm, A.R. Rahman began assembling the orchestra back in 2020.
And so we auditioned more than 200 people, and all of them are really good. Whatever we get, we'll make that a sound of this orchestra.
When auditioning for an orchestra, musicians can submit a performance piece of their own choosing or get assigned a piece to perform. That's how their skills are assessed. However, this is not the case with a conductor, and since they don't play a particular instrument, the audition process is a little different.
In June 2021, I got a call from artistic director Maisa Qara asking me if I would be interested in conducting the Firdaus Orchestra, the first female orchestra in the MENA region for Expo 2020 Dubai. And I was like, wow, that's an amazing and once in a lifetime opportunity. And I was like, of course, I would be honored and privileged to do that. And after a series of interviews, they also had my portfolio and the previous concert videos that I had done in Beirut before going, until I got the acceptance to go. And very quickly, I just packed my stuff and went to Dubai to start this very exciting adventure.
I felt like she had that instinct, she had the it factor, and she had this nice, charming quality which needs to manage people. and then she came and I understood that she was attention to details and not taking anything lightly, and pushing perfection itself was like, now we got somebody, and it is almost autopilot. All we have to do now is to sit and jam and get what they're going to play.
A lot of people tell me that you don't conduct, you dance. So my entire body is involved, and I can't help it. It's not something I calculate, because what we want to do is not tell the musicians instructions. It's for that to show the music, and music moves through times. It flows through time. So this is why my entire body is involved. My entire gesture is involved. And I feel this is my way of communicating. There are so many schools of conducting. There are so many conducting styles, but mine is one that is very expressive, that really involves all the body, but also maintaining clarity and precision.
The conductor's role is central to bringing the musicians together, and in a way, they are credited for the way in which an orchestra interprets a piece of music.
Now, for a lot of people, they look at me and you're like, oh, you're that person that just waves her hands around. Like, do you really do anything? And, for me, conducting has to do way more with what happens behind the scenes than on stage. So the conductor gets to work with the orchestra, prepare the orchestra, and rehearse with the orchestra. It's kind of like a stage director. For example, when you go and you watch Romeo and Juliet, for example, there are so many different renditions of this play, but every single time it's different because the artistic director has a vision for that. It's the same for the conductor. So how many times, for example, have we heard the same, for example, symphony by Mozart, but every single time the interpretation is different because of the musical decisions and direction the conductor wants to take. So all this rehearsing, all the vision, all the interpretation happens in the rehearsal space. But during the concerts, what people see, these hand gestures are meant to keep the orchestra together, because when you have so many different musicians and players, they need to start together, they need to stay together. But other than tempo, it's kind of an exchange of energy. We give them the energy to play, the dynamics, the direction, and the orchestra performs and gives it back to the public.
Furnished with a brilliant conductor and talented musicians from 23 different nationalities, the Firdaus Orchestra set out to begin rehearsing.
It was so exciting. Everyone was so motivated, so excited, and this huge positive energy and fantastic repertoire we had all brought together really was an amazing journey since day one. So, slowly it starts, of course, as a place where everyone respects everyone, where everyone is kind to everyone. But slowly, with time, this is always something that happens with time, the bonds grow stronger. We get used to each other as musicians, but also as people, which enriches and makes even a more beautiful sound for the orchestra. When you're in an orchestra, it's not about the individual anymore. It's about the collective. It's about blending the sounds, because the new sound is the collective sound of the orchestra. And in the first rehearsal, we were just all there and we started working on the repertoire. So that, that takes time, because everyone's a professional musician, everyone can play the notes, but it's also quite a challenge to be able to blend as an orchestra, to understand each other as an orchestra, and discover and create the new sound of this orchestra that is quite unique, by the way, because this is not the typical Western orchestra. This is an orchestra that brings together the traditional Western instruments, but also blending them with Eastern instruments.
So I kept my mind open. We don't want to think that there's an Arabic orchestra or a Western orchestra or Indian orchestra. Okay, we'll have qanun, we'll have ney, we have violin, viola, cello, and then we'll have a saxophone. We'll have 3-4 brass people. It just fell into place.
The piece features an array of instruments, as well as a choir of Drupad singers, the oldest existing form of Indian classical music, which is regarded as a form of meditation. It's called Humanitas pro orismos el emel. Humanitas is Latin for human nature. Pro orismos is the Greek word for predestiny, and el emel is Arabic for hope. The name in itself blending East and West.
It starts with this oud solo, bringing the aura of this region. And then it goes to strings, and then that's the prelude. And then the real main piece comes in. It starts with the piano and a synth. And then I brought this choir from the Drupad kind of Hindustani, bending voices. And that actually is the main core tune of this. So each note actually goes back to the higher note and goes back to the lower note, and which is mostly like Darbari kind of a raga in Hindustani. And the very end is the full fanfare. I don't feel shy to use a synth with an orchestra or an Indian, Drupad with an orchestra, as long as the final emotion really moves you.
The challenge was to find ways to bring out these instruments that were not specifically designed to play in the middle of a big orchestra. Most of them sometimes also are solo instruments. How to make them blend within an orchestra when they are not necessarily soloists. And of course, being able to find the correct balance to make them shine, but not also overpower. The nai was particularly challenging because I would say the timbre of the instrument, the tuning of the instrument is sometimes not easy to integrate, but also, it's such a delicate instrument. So for balance also, it was a bit challenging to bring it out, though it's an absolutely beautiful instrument. And Rebecca, our nai player, is just absolutely brilliant.
The Firdaus Orchestra is not only unique for the style of music it plays and the way it fuses different instruments, it's also unique in that it's the first all-female orchestra in the region.
Personally, I forget that it's an all-female ensemble. I don't even think about it because for me, what is in front of me is musicians that are making music. So we really forget that it's an all-female orchestra. The reason why it is a female orchestra is not for musical purposes, but rather as a statement to break the stereotype of women in this part of the world.
Here we're actually breaking stereotypes, breaking all those cliches which people think about the Middle Eastern region. We are going forward, holding to tradition, but moving forward in things which we can. And the integrity of everything is there, but this is how the world becomes more beautiful and complementing different arts, and arts bring joy.
The orchestra had its stellar debut to a full house. The audience was in the thousands, and the energy in the venue was palpable, with many fans eagerly awaiting to see Rahman and the Firdaus Orchestra play a space-themed medley and their highly anticipated new composition.
Incredibly talented women of over 23 nationalities from across the region unite together to celebrate a unique musical experience called the Firdaus Orchestra.
That was amazing. That was one of my favorites, actually, because we had all these big themes from movies like Star Wars and E.T., these big epic orchestral music. So that one was really, really fun. Loved that concert.
Being the conductor, Yasmina is facing away from the audience for most of the concert.
You get so immersed into this musical world that you forget everything around you. The focus is so high. I don't know how to explain it. The energy is so high. It's like we're in a completely different parallel place in a bubble, and I really forget everything around me. The only thing I know is around me is me and the musicians and the energy surrounding us. I sometimes go back after a concert and I ask, was there a lot of people? How was the people's reaction? I don't even pay attention to that.
Since then, the Firdaus Orchestra has performed several times as part of the Expo programming and will continue its journey beyond March 2022 with more performances in the UAE and around the world. In addition, a new state-of-the-art studio has been created to house the orchestra with top cutting-edge consoles and tools for future recordings.
I think it's Firdaus is it brings in the memory of, spirituality. And every action is done promising Firdaus, of devotion and amal. And so I felt like this should remain of something very pure. It breaks stereotypes and it's inspiring a whole new generation. And all the things they thought it's not possible here, and it's broken and it says, yes, it's possible. Yes, we can be world class and we can entertain the world in a way with keeping all the traditions and integrity, still move forward.
The Firdaus Orchestra is striving to shape the future of music and inspiring the next generation of young talent to pursue their dreams.
I really hope that this will inspire young, talented girls to pursue music as a career. That, a young girl would look at this orchestra and say, this can be a job for me. I can play in an orchestra. Maybe I can be the one behind, the microphones or help the sound engineer. Maybe I can be the musician. Maybe I can be the art director. So I hope that this just opens the minds and eyes of people to the million possibilities they can do in the field of music.
So imagine if 10 years back, it's not like a mainstream thing, conducting. Now every kid wants to conduct an orchestra. So that's great, that's inspirational.
Inside Expo takes you behind the scenes at Expo 2020 Dubai, sharing our stories and others across the 170-year history of this global event. Learn more by visiting virtualexpodubai.com. Inside Expo is produced by Kerning Cultures Network. We release episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And if you enjoyed listening to this episode, share it with your friends and leave us a review. We release episodes every Tuesday and Friday. Subscribe to the show on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And if you enjoyed listening to this episode, share it with your friends and leave us a review.